Hello, everyone. Welcome to our fourth Open Creative Space live stream. Yay! Here at Learn, we believe that making is what makes us human. We make, therefore we are. This session is for educators who want to get into making and STEAM with their students, both online and in your classrooms. You might have seen some of us in your classrooms, and we miss you a lot. So we are bringing these to you in the hopes that you will be sharing them with your students and continuing the making journey. We also have a post with pictures and links for students at, where is it? At ocs.learnquebec.ca. And today we are going to be working on exploring spinning. We'll be working with things that go round, things that spin. And the hashtag that you can use is exploring spinning. You can use this hashtag to explore stuff that's already been done. And also, if you're going to post some stuff, use this hashtag. I'm here with my wonderful colleagues, Chris Colley and Craig Bullitt, and they will be the ones that will be using their, coming to you from their homes, and they will be using their document cameras to show you how to make the actual spinning gadgets that we're making. So a question that I have for you and for ourselves is why are we live streaming, specifically making things? Why do we believe that making is important in a STEAM context? Well, first of all, making is playful and inventive for all ages. So doing something like making spinners is playful and inventive. It's a good way for parents and kids to come together as well. So that's something that might be interesting in this time. Making is also generative. So when you're making something, you're getting ideas as you're doing this, and those ideas lead to other ideas. So making is not something that you just do with your hands. It's a way to get your hands and your brain to work together, actually. And because we're working with limited materials that we have at home, it allows you to see materials in a different way. Like today, for example, we will be seeing how a pen can be used for not just writing. And on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Chris, and he is going to show us some of the stuff that he has and maybe work a little curriculum into there and demo a little bit of stuff.
Hi guys, welcome to our Exploring Spinning live stream. So today we're going to show you some techniques. I'm going to show you some materials and how you can assemble these. There's lots of different ways to do it. And please share your findings as you go along. You can use the hashtag Exploring Spinning in Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, wherever the hashtags are taken. So the first thing I want to talk about are two laws. Now we want to connect these things to our curriculum a little bit. So we're going to kind of look at Newton's two laws, law 1 and law 3. And they kind of go as such. So the first one is a body at rest remains at rest. Interesting. Law 3, for every reaction, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So here we have the two laws that we're really going to kind of focus in on. I want us to start thinking about what might influence our spinners to stop or to keep going. There are some definite techniques in there that we can look at. And what does my body interaction with the object do? So I am going to put some reaction into it, and what do I get out of it? So we'll look at those two laws, and more specifically from our curriculum, we have some actually direct connections here. First, we're going to look at the combined effects of several forces on an object. So these are all to do with the spinners. Keep in mind, think about this, have your students think about this by asking them some questions, and Sylvia will help us with that reflection at the end. But what are the forces affecting the object that I've created? And then the bigger one we're looking at is obviously forces in motion. I'm going to put a force onto a spinner and it is going to produce a motion. So those are directly connected to our curriculum, and this is for our elementary curriculum, grade 5, 6, 4, 3. It's a life curriculum, really. So let's kind of look at some materials. You'll see that I put this up on our blog that you have access to. This is a really great little list that the Tinker Studio out of San Francisco put together. And we're going to basically look at creating a spinner where we have an axle. That's kind of our tip. we're going to look at the body of the spinner itself. And you can see that most of the time they are circular. And then we're also going to look at weight. And we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. So remember, we're going to be putting force on it and seeing what happens, what motion is produced. So some of the first things I started to do, and I'll start with the easy stuff, and then I'm going to work my way up to a little bit more complicated. This first one, super simple. You all have thumbtacks at home. This is actually a perfect little axle right there. And what I've done is I've just kind of jumped into some plasticine or Play-Doh, and I put it around it, right? So I took my pin and I just made a little circle around the spinner. So I have a perfect little spinner ready to go. There you go. All right. So, and that's a really simple one. And I created this yesterday, and I won't tell you how many hours I played around with it, but a lot of hours, and it was really fun. So that's a simple one to get going. And then obviously I could modify the actual spinner. I could modify the circle. I could also maybe dip this into a little bit of paint on the tip and then use it on a piece of paper to create some kinds of art form. So there's a very basic one. I upped it a little bit and I got my Sharpies out. So what I did is I just took a Sharpie, and again, I created a form just using the plasticine. I found the center. Very important to find the center, because if I don't find the center, it will be off balance. And an off balance body will definitely affect the duration of the spin and how it spins and how long it spins. So let's try this one out. I took the top off, so it should leave some kind of trace. It's a fine one. There you go. You can just start creating spin art right here like that. And I think Craig's going to show us another one in a minute, but there again is another very simple one. Let's bring it up a notch. Now, a very good friend of mine is a knitter, and she had these upholstery needles. Okay, so it's a big needle with kind of a dull point, and I was like, ooh, awesome. I really want to get this going on something. So I took that needle and I took a old soda pop bottle that's just made out of plastic, and then I made a hole in the middle of it. All right, so on this one you can kind of see, if you look inside, it kind of already shows you the middle. You see that little star? So I know that that's the center of the cap. And then I just had to make a hole, and then I put this right through the tip. And let me show you the results I came up with. Right, so here's my needle. Oops. My needle, and then there's my cap, right? And the tip comes through. Then what I did is I needed some wings. So I just had these foamy things I just got out of my craft box. And they're just foam. I could have cut those out of paper or cardboard if I wanted to. And I put them so that they were perfectly, I think this is set 85 degrees or 75 degrees apart, right? And then the last thing I did, because I tried it just with like this, right? And it was having a really hard time spinning. So a friend of mine on Twitter said, well, put some weight on it. And I was like, oh, yes. What's that called? Centrifugal force that pushes outward as I spin. So what this allowed it to do is kind of stabilize it. And also it made it spin like no tomorrow. Let me give it a little shot here for you guys. You gotta have kind of dry hands. Right, so, and then I could just play around with it. A couple of other things I did with this is I adjusted how long the tip was coming out the bottom. So I didn't glue it. So I was able to kind of pull the cap up and down to adjust the tip, which was really cool. Okay, so this one is, I love this one. It really goes nicely. And I did a couple of videos I'll share on the blog with you as well for this cool spinner. All right. The next one, I wanted to create something out of a bottle, right? So I took one of these bottles and carefully I cut it. You might want to recommend or suggest the parents to actually cut with the scissors if it's very young children, very young students. And basically I spliced it, right? So it was like this, and then I just cut it and it came out like that, all right? I kept the top on the bottom, And then I made a hole. And again, Craig has a cool technique on how to make holes that is not going to be too dangerous. And I put a chopstick. Now you can see normal chopsticks, where's my camera? There we go, are not very pointy. So what I did to make it a little pointier is I just got a good old fashioned sharpener, and I just sharpened the tip a little bit because I wanted it to be a little more pointy so that it would stand up a little bit more on edge. And then again, underneath, I weighed it down. You can see that this time I put some 5 cents right at the tips of the spinners. And this allows the force from the center to be pushed out and create something that will spin a little bit more reliable. Now, I'll give you a note on this. My son was playing with it before, and one of the 5 cents popped off. So you can see right now, it's not going to work very well, right? But again, this is our trial and error. We got to figure this stuff out by trying it out. I probably spun this top about 200 times yesterday, just to kind of muck around with it. These little balls, I just have my arts and crafts, and I just wanted to make a little cool effect so that as it spins, it creates these kind of circles with the foam as it turns around, which is super fun. Then the last couple of things I will show you are my art ones, okay? These are the ones where I attached a little bit of a marker to. So this first one I did, I like this one a lot, it's just made out of a styrofoam paper plate. You know, it would go up like that, paper plate. And then I took a bunch of my foamies and I stuck them around so that it would create a cool pattern. And then just for fun, I cut out the little notches so that it would be a little bit more, you know, interesting to look at. So then I took my pen, again, another Sharpie, right? And I just glued it in place. I had to play around again with the length of the pen. But once I figured that out, I could then take it. Again, you see, I weighted it down very equally, right? So it's symmetrical so that it will have this nice spinning motion going, and then away it spins, right? Now, the cool part about this one is when you look underneath, you get to create all these really cool effects, right? So you can actually kind of create some art as you're going through. I did the same thing with this little spinner. And this is just from a bottle. It's an aluminum cap. Again, I made a hole in the top. And then I put some felt and then some popsicle sticks, right? Just simple popsicle sticks. And then again, you can see underneath, I put coins to weigh it down. And then I can choose any color that I want, insert it into the top like this, and away you go. So there you go. There's a ton of different ideas that you can use. I'm going to shoot it back over to Sylvia. Thanks for joining me.
I really feel like making some spinners now. I wanted to draw your attention to a couple of things that Chris was saying that I thought were really important. So first of all, I hope that you notice that we are deep into the technological design process. And that is a part of the QEP in the science program for elementary and for secondary, but conceivably maybe this might be more suited to elementary right now. So I wanted to highlight that in the QEP, we have both content and process. And that's true for all the subjects. So in the case of science, we were talking about forces, we were talking about Newton's laws in there, and motion, but we were also talking about the design process and how that plays out in this case. In this case, when you're asking your students to design a top, a spinning top, a spinner, you're asking them to engage in a technological design process. You're asking them to figure out what it is they want to make, possibly sketch it out, do a lot of trial and error, and all that is part of the technological design process. Now, when you do the design process and the content together, you're creating a lot of effervescence. You're creating a lot of potential for learning and for making key connections. One of the ways that we're going to do that is through questions. We're going to see that later. We're going to see the questions that you might ask students later to make sure that that they solidify that. So Chris went through a bunch of trial and error. He found out that he needed symmetry. He needed to find the center. He found out that balance was important and also weight. So balanced is good, but if it's much harder to be balanced when something is light. When it's heavier, it's got more spinning power. And then the force that he's going to exert as he spins. So these are this is lots of hands-on science. Sometimes as teachers we get a little nervous and we want to teach theory first, but in this way you're allowing kids to discover those concepts while they're doing something that they actually think is playing, because it is playing. Learning is playing. Okay, so I'm going to now turn it over to Craig, and he will show us some examples of spinning concepts that are other than just hops, where spinning can happen in the world, etc. So over to you.
Thanks, Sylvia. So let's have a look at that. I'll move you over to my doc cam. There you go. So if we think about things in nature, we could look at even these helicopter seeds. Some people call them whirly birds, I think is another name for them. So you have a horizontal spin happening with those. And what's interesting about these helicopter seeds is that the axle and the weight are one and the same. So you need to think about that when you're designing stuff. So we have the body, obviously the fins or the wings, whatever you want to call them. And then the axle, which is down here, which is also weighted with the seeds above it, So it's kind of a neat thing. So here are some paper replicas, I guess, of those helicopter seeds. And there's information on this in the link provided below our feed today, our presentation. So let me show you how these ones work. And if you want to know how to make those, that'd be great. But I'll drop them from the ceiling. I'll get up here and here they come. I'll do that one more time. There you go. So this is super fun, very simple, right? I just used some cardstock and a paper clip. And so just did some folding and I created this helicopter seed, spinning seed idea. So that's for a horizontal spin. And we also have a vertical spin. I could show you that windmill idea there. And so with the windmill, it's pushing or pulling the wind, right? And in the other one, we had lifting and lowering. So this one's going to push and pull. And I'll show you an example of a windmill that I made, a couple of them. Actually, so here's one. Pretty straightforward. And this is one of my first examples of making it. So it was pretty rough, and that's to be expected, right? It's a prototype, so it doesn't spin very well. I'm going to turn on my fan here. And I actually have to help it along because it's sticking a little bit. And that's part of the design thing that I learned as I went along. There was too much glue. But sometimes it will kick in slowly. But in any case, as these evolved, I moved on to something like that. And then it ended up being something like that. But I had help with this. This one is quite an impressive spinner, and I had somebody who has a vinyl cutter who cut that, but it's still cardstock. It's just paper, spinning much better. And I'll show you why that is a little bit. If we look a little more closely, I put a nail in the center, but I actually use these little pieces of straw as spacers, and that provides a bushing, and those things spin. I'll show you how I actually made this thing to show you how that works, but that helps the spinning process and reduces the friction. That's why this thing spins much more smoothly. So let's have a look at how I put that together. Very simple stuff. So you can see the tools I have on the side here. I have, for the most part, I tore things with the ruler. I didn't even need the scissors really to do this. But so you square off a piece of paper. And again, the link below will show you examples of how to do that. And I'll show you how I put this together. I used my glue gun to stick it. You could see how the square is done. And then I just bring my points to the center. And because I was using a hot glue gun, it's tough on the fingers, I was using a pencil eraser to hold it. So I would hold it in place, let the glue dry or cool off, and then I'd move the next one and line it up, and so on. I'll do those so you can see. So pretty quick, pretty simple. And you can see that turned out exactly as the other ones did. And you can get as fancy as you like. You can get plastic old duotangs. Sometimes you have old plastic duotangs. You can go very fancy, make a weatherproof spinner like this. So that was that. And I'll show you, where am I at? Sorry about that. Oh, I guess I'll just get right into another spinner. I was going to show you more of that, but let's look at this. So there we go. So on to tops, kind of what Chris was doing before. And you can see I have a couple of examples here. The stuff I used old CDs to do this, and then just some craft markers, some pretty thick ones, with the cap off because it gave me a nice point to spin. And then Chris was talking about symmetry before. You can see on there, I hope, I put some washers and some nuts on there, and you can see they're evenly spaced. And it makes a nice pattern on there, and that's giving me weight on the outer circle. And what's interesting about these guys is that the weighted one, if I place them properly, spins almost twice as long as the non-weighted one. So I'll give these a spin and see if this works out. I'll stand up to do this. I didn't give that one a good spin. Yeah, there we go. And you get the idea. They'll go for a pretty good time. The weighted one is quite a lot more effective than the non-weighted one. So you can see what happened there. So that's an example of a spinner, pretty cool, with pretty simple materials that you have at home. And something that Chris had mentioned before also, that I would show you how to find the center. What's fun about using recycled pieces like this, I'll bring this over. I found this online, and it's available in our link below as well, this center finder. So it's actually a circle square, I think is the proper term for it. And what that allows me to do is find the center of a circle, because it's easy if you made the circle with a compass, right? You know where the point is when you do your circle. But if you're using things like this, it could be tricky to find where the middle is. So there's the top of a can, the same idea. And if you're off center, if you don't find the middle and you make that your axle, then you're out of luck. Your spinner is not going to be very effective. So this guy, the center finder, just sits on the outside of the circle, anywhere really. And then this allows me to just make a mark on the thing. And as I spin the circle, you can see that right there. I usually do a couple. 2 is good. That's probably the proper center, but I'll do one more. And you can see how they intersect like that. So again, all this information is available in our link. And a safety tip for making a hole. So what I will do is actually use a nail instead of using a drill, especially with metal parts. If you're doing a can top like that, it's a bit tricky to drill and it spins on you. It'll end up cutting you. So you want to be careful with that stuff. So what I'm going to do is just use a nail as a punch. So I don't have to drill and spin. I can just punch right through. So usually I will do this on the floor, but I would just take a piece of wood, put it underneath my circle, find the center with the nail, and just give it a shot. Try that again. There you go. So we found the center of a circle pretty quickly. We stuck a nail in the center, and then the nail can actually act as your axle, right? So there I have a wheel going on that will be nice and symmetrical, and then I can think about cutting it into a shape like Chris did before, or put some weights around the ends and play with that. So that's finding the circle, finding the center of a circle, sorry, and a safe way to put a hole through it. And actually, while I'm doing these design things, a lot of questions come up, right? So I talked about the weights. I'll bring this one back. Those are the types of questions that I'm thinking through in my head as I'm going along, right? What'll happen if I put one weight on? Well, it gets lopsided. What happens if I balance it on the other side, and so on? So the trial and error allows me to think it through as I go along. So those are some of the questions that come up, and I'm just looking at another one. Even impacting the spin. So that was something that came up when we started today. The cardboard you see on my tabletop, the reason I use that is my spinner wasn't working very well on a smooth, glossy, white plastic tabletop. It wasn't actually spinning at all. It would just slide and fall. So that was something I had to think about also. So surface area, the point, the weights, all of those kinds of things are questions that I'm asking myself as I'm designing and moving this forward to make it better each time. And I think Sylvia is going to elaborate on questions a little bit more. So maybe we'll send it back to her and she can continue with that.
Thanks, Craig. First of all, I don't know about you, but I want to go out and make a center finder immediately, because that was really cool. I'm looking around my house at all the circly things that I have here that I could see where the center is. And I want to build one because I thought that was really cool. Thanks, Craig, for showing us all that, and especially the center finder. So I don't know if you remember, for those of you who were with us last time, we talked about failure and the importance of failure when you are working with these kinds of open-ended activities. We talked about failure, and today, in addition to failure, I wanted to talk about agency. So agency is a word that I like to use a lot when I'm in the classroom, obviously with the teachers. And it means essentially the choices that we give to students when we're asking them to make things. So when, in this case, especially if we look at what Chris was making, he showed us a lot of spinning tops that had different, I guess the top part of the visible things, but also the material choices. So there are lots of different materials that he was able to choose from, and he also was able to make his top look like he wanted it to. So that he made some small ones, he made some bigger ones, he decorated them, he didn't decorate them, he used colors, he used craft materials to make a pattern on them. All of these things are not peripheral, not to the student making them. They are a part of what makes that thing their thing. And as long as it's that thing, it's not that interesting. But when it's my thing, it becomes very interesting. So that's where agency, that's where this idea of agency comes in. So we want to build activities for students that offer enough agency, that offer enough student choice and student voice so that they can make things their own. And that is a way that they're going to go deeper into understanding what they're learning, because we are trying to have them get in some content through some process, right? So how do we do that? Well, one of the ways we do that when Craig, Chris, myself go into classrooms, work with kids at the end, or even all the way through, we ask the kids questions to have them reflect on what they're doing. So the questions are not leading questions, they are simply open-ended questions that get at some key concepts. So what are some questions that we would ask them based on the spinning, based on our exploring spinning? Well, we could ask them something like, why does your top spin for a long time? Or if it didn't spin for a long time, why doesn't your top spin for a long time? We could ask them, why is it important to find the center? And they'll be telling us in their words, and they'll be telling us in their words based on their experience. Well, I really didn't look at the center, so that one didn't work, but when I did it with the center, it did work. So they're going to be able to tell us in their words what happened, and we're going to scaffold that into an actual concept that they're learning. We can also ask them, how does the surface affect the spinning? Let's say they're not getting it, let's say it's too slippery, but then they try it on some other surface. So we can ask them, how does the thing that you spin it on affect the spinning? We might ask them, what do different tips do? Like a blunt tip versus a very pointy tip versus a very sharp one, like a tack, like what Chris showed us at the beginning. So all of these open-ended questions, we're going to at each of our live streams, we're going to keep adding questions that you could ask kids, and that especially if you yourself are doing a Zoom session and kids are sharing with you what they made, these are questions that you would be asking them as they're recounting what they made and showing you what they made. You would be asking them these kinds of questions. That is all for our live stream today. Next week we will be back with, let me just check, Marble Maze. So we'll be working with hashtag Marble Maze. And you're able to access this live stream on our blog, ocs.learnquebec.ca, along with all manner of different links that Chris and Craig referred to as they were talking, and any other things for your students so that you can send your students to a page and have them work through our exploring spinning that we did today. All right, thank you. See you next time.